Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Export to Japan podcast, brought to you in association with the British Embassy in Tokyo, Japan. And on this edition, we're going to look into the exciting world of asset management in Japan and look at how the whole sort of fintech sector, asset management sector is growing rapidly and all the exciting opportunities that are going on there. And together with that, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper and learn more about some of the support that UK companies can get if they're working in that sector and looking at entering the Japanese market. And to help us with that, I'm delighted to welcome two special guests today. We have two gentlemen joining us from the Fintech Association of Japan. We have Kito-san and Kishi-san, who have very kindly given up some time to speak with us today. So gentlemen, welcome to both of you. Great to have you on board, and thank you for giving your time to join us. I'm excited to get into this discussion with you and learn more about it. And if I may just kick off, before we dive into the detail of your actual association and what you do, just to learn a little bit more about the market opportunity, excuse me, market opportunity and situation in Japan, I'd like to kick off, and maybe Kishi-san, if I could start with you, perhaps could you give us a little bit more of an overview of the sort of bigger picture of the fintech landscape, fintech market in Japan, please? And welcome, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much, Steve. Hello, everyone. My name is Yuki. I'm the director of Fintech Association of Japan, as well as I'm also having another role at Plug and Play Japan as a fintech director. So to answer your question, yes, the general overview of fintech market in Japan. To begin with, I think it might be better to kick off with a more high-level overview of Japan, maybe startup ecosystem, then maybe dive into the fintech subsectors. So in Japan, there has been very strong positive momentums when it comes to startup ecosystem. The government has been pushing to foster this startup ecosystem, and then in terms of investments that flowing into this startup ecosystem has been sort of growing for the past 10 years. And of course, last year has been we've seen a little dip in terms due to the COVID-19 pandemic situations, but in general trend that has been growing. And then of course the fintech, the market, has also been growing since then. We do have one sort of research paper conducted by Yano Research Institute back in, I think, 2018, 2019. Based on that report, for the previous 2 years, 2017, 2018, the market has actually did grow. And at the same time, the forecasted, from 2019 to 2022, we were expecting to have more rapid growth in this fintech market. And I mean, of course, the word fintech has actually started to appear in the media since like 2014, 2015. And since then, the Japan market has been on a positive growth trend. And according to, this is another report conducted by EY, one of the big four companies. According to them, their research, the growth rate of Japan fintech ecosystem has actually surpassed the rate of, let's say, APAC, US, and the EU. So we kind of see that the trend is actually sort of in a positive, it's growing phase. And also another aspect is, I mean, as mentioned, last year has been a shrink in terms of total volume of investment, not only fintech, but in general, ecosystem has actually shrank. But if we look at each sectors, this is another report conducted by one research institutions. But the fintech sector has actually improved, while the other sectors has actually diminished, deteriorated.
Interesting.
So I think that's also show that the fintech is still one of the strongest categories in Japan.
That sounds really exciting. And it's good to hear when you mentioned how the Japanese government have got the momentum and the strategy behind this. So is that more at a sort of national level with the Japanese government, or is that more of a regional thing, or is it a little bit of both supporting?
I think it's both level. For the national level, yes, they have in a way selected a startup innovation hub for each region. So let's say Tokyo, Kansai areas, Osaka, as well as Nagoya and other regions they have selected, and then they're trying to sort of the boost this new industry, this new startup ecosystem in each locations. So that's one thing. But at the same time, for the more regional levels, for example, the Tokyo metropolitan government, they've also been very strong supporter. Not only fintech, but in startup in general. But of course, the fintech is one of the biggest pillar in the TMG side that they're trying to sort of foster this ecosystem industry.
Yeah. Great, I got it. Yeah, and in fact, we did a podcast with them in this series a couple of months ago, and they told us about the detail of some of the great initiatives they're doing to foster that startup culture, and it was great to hear all about it. Okay, that's a great overview. Now, if we can just sort of probe in a little bit deeper. So, in terms of the fintech sector, what particular trends, if any, are you seeing at the moment over there in Japan?
Yes, it could be similar to other countries, but I think the COVID-19, the pandemic, has actually sort of accelerated the businesses, accelerated these, in a way, digital transformation in general in Japan. And of course, the fintech is one of the areas that has actually accelerated due to the situations. So, for example, one of the notable one will be the settlement side, whereby there has been many cashless payment players. I mean, they used to be a lot, but now in terms of sort of the technology adoption curve, I think it kind of went into the majority level. People have actually started using it. I mean, even let's say my grandparents have started using this cashless payment applications since last year. So I think that area has actually improved a lot. And of course, the lending side, there's been many transactional lending players that are coming into the market. There are, for example, the digital banking areas is also one area, especially for those non-financial institution players. They have now started to look into the work called embedded finance, whereby these non-FIs are thinking to utilize the financial services embedded into their own services. So I think these areas are becoming really hot. And of course, looking more to sort of consumer B2C level, the robo advisory guys, for example, in the US, the Robinhood has been that's the word has actually emerged due to this COVID-19. But even in Japan, there are many individuals that now started doing this investment thanks to these fintech players. That the hurdles to do investment has actually went down thanks to the technologies. Yes.
Really good. Okay, that's exciting, and it's always encouraging when we've been through this tricky period like the pandemic that we've all had to work our way through, and we're continuing to work through. It's always encouraging to hear of opportunities that are coming up and how technology trends are coming on the back of that. And clearly, there's some big ones in this particular sector, as you're illustrating. One question sort of related to that, the context of this discussion is for international companies that may be looking at the Japanese market. I mean, you over in Japan, you have the same sort of culture and mentality that we have here in the UK of an island culture. And I know in some industries and in some sectors, it can be quite challenging for international companies to break into the market like that. What is your general feeling from your experience? Do you think there is opportunities for international companies to come in and bring innovative technologies and concepts into the market? Is Japan sort of open to those ideas and those innovations in this particular sector?
It's definitely yes. Yes, in terms of there are many sort of large corporates that are looking for a sort of cutting edge technologies, cutting edge services, like the ones, let's say, in the UK. And for example, like myself, I'm now the companies that I'm working for at the moment, Plug and Play Japan, is we're trying to bridge the gap between these large corporates and then the international startups globally. And I mean, in Japan, the word open innovations, it's becoming very, very buzz at the moment, whereby, of course, these large corporations, they do have many resources, they do have many assets, but when it comes down to innovations, they need external players like fintech players to do any innovative activities. So in general, yes, I think that these players are looking for a very, as mentioned, cutting edge technologies and services. But having said that, as you mentioned, there are many challenges, especially these international startups doing any collaboration, doing any partnership with the Japanese corporates. And of course, there are a few examples. I mean, the number one is, of course, the language is different. Always, not always, but some of these players in Japan, they are always asking, startups asking them like, hey, do you have any sort of Japanese person in your companies? I mean, does your service already conducted in Japan, in Japanese, for example? These language barriers is also one thing, and of course, the understanding the business, doing a bit like understanding the culture itself. That's also a challenge, and of course, the way we do business in Japan and the way business is conducted outside Japan is very different. In Japan, in terms of decision-making process, it takes a little bit longer time compared to other regions. That's from a startup perspective, you have to have the right level of expectations in terms of timelines, for example. What else? I mean, there are a bunch of examples that I can come up, but let me stop.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and they're great examples, and thank you for sharing them. And they are really, really important examples, actually. So I'm glad you've brought them up. And while we're on that point, and I do want to come on later in the discussion to the detail of your association and what you do. So we'll get onto the detail of that a little later, and I think we'll bring Kito-san in for part of that discussion. But what I do want to understand now, you've brought that topic up about some of the challenges that international companies face. I mean, is that the sort of thing that you and your colleagues can also help advise companies with? Because that some of those points, that they're not specific to this particular sector, they are more market entry and commercial relationship related points. But is that part of the package of where you can help guide companies in the right direction, foreign companies?
Yes, I mean, speaking from a plug and play perspective, yes, of course, that's where we see we can add values to the international startups, and that's where we are here to support their business, especially for the international startups to come into the Japanese market. And of course, from a Fintech Association perspective, we do have many sort of strong. I mean, we do have large networks of large corporates. So that's where maybe Fintech Association can help you sort of the business matching these kind of opportunities. Yes.
Got it. Brilliant. That sounds really, really good. Okay, great. Are there any, my next question really is, are there any particular examples that you can think of that you may have been involved in or you may be aware of where there has been, if there's a UK company that you can think of that's come into the market and had some success, but if it's not a UK based one, an international one, are there any particular kind of case studies or examples you could mention to us?
Yes, I mean, speaking from UK, especially UK and as well as fintech perspective, the companies like Revolut and TransferWise, I mean now called Wise, they're both based in Japan. Let's say for Revolut, I think they were here since 2017, if I'm not wrong. And they have, in terms of their product services to the individuals, I think they only started last year, but they've been here for some years. I mean, TransferWise, I mean, the Wise, I think they've been here for more than 5 years, if I'm not wrong. I mean, for example, like 5 years ago, I did my MBA at University of Cambridge, and then that's the time I first used the TransferWise services to transfer the tuition fees from Japan to UK. So I think that was a great experience. Yeah, so I think that these two companies, fintech company has been here for several years. Of course, I mean, whether are they successful or not, that really depends on their KPIs. I think they should have their own KPIs or benchmarks. Yeah, given the fact that they're still here in Japan, for example, I was a user for the services. I think that they've been doing a pretty good sort of success case in Japan. And at the same time, that's more sort of B2C space. But at the same time, for the B2B side, there's one company, a RegTech company called Comply Advantage. That's one of the sort of regulatory technology service in Japan based in UK. We kind of supported the business in Japan through our accelerator programs 2 years ago. And yes, I mean, I think they used us in terms of to get to sort of do the market feasibility check. We kind of introduced many corporates at the time for any potential collaborations. And then at the time, they kind of decided not to proceed further. But now, I think after 2 years, they now started to see to build more footprint in Japan. So I think, of course, depending on the definition of success, but there has been a few fintech players, especially from the UK, that are coming to the Japanese market.
Yeah, they're great examples. Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. And it's always good, I think, for our listeners that are considering, considering Japan for the first time, it's always good to know of some other companies that have entered the market and been through that journey and had varying degrees of success out there. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, one final question I just want to touch on, and this is a slightly tricky one. You may or may not have an answer for this, but you did talk about some of the trends in the market a little bit earlier, and how the pandemic has driven some changes in behavior and where that has led to opportunity. Are there anything else, sort of, a subsection to that question? Are there any particular sectors or opportunities that you could identify where you think there could be opportunities in Japan right now, where there is some momentum or there is a need, and there may not necessarily be some homegrown talent or knowledge in that area where foreign companies could bring solutions in? And anything in particular that comes to mind there? Yeah,
sure. Of course, I think every people have different views and opinions, but from my perspective, I think there will be more chances for the players on the B2B side instead of a B2C side. The reason being is that for the B2C side, you need to have Japanese localizations, especially to the individual players and individual consumers, as well as you need to have right marketing strategies. There will be sort of more investments, more like tailored to the Japanese market. But when it comes down to B2B, the hurdles is less from my perspective. Maybe Kito-san might have different views. But if for the fintech players, if you're B2B side, then I think there will be a lot more opportunities in Japan at the moment. And of course, I'm now speaking from speaking on a fintech, the actual player itself. But at the same time, I think there has been sort of growing opportunities for the venture capital companies as well. I mean, in Japan, compared to other markets, let's say US, UK, or China, the actual funding that flowing into the this fintech or startup ecosystem in general, it's very low compared to other markets. But at the same time, I see as a sort of huge improvement, huge room for the growth in Japan. And I mean, recently we do see many international venture capitals that are coming to this Japanese market. Like, for example, for US, like Sequoia Capital, which is one of the top tier venture capital in the States, they're now thinking to come to the Japanese market. And other players, I mean, I believe there's one UK venture capitals called Greyhound Capital. They invested, for example, Revolut, N26, as well as they invested some of the Japanese fintech players like Free, as well as Cash. So I think it's great to see these venture capitals money flowing into this fintech ecosystem. So I think that's also another area that I see some sort of potential growth in coming years as well.
Understood. That sounds very, very exciting. Good, thank you. That's been a great conversation. And I think at this point, I would now like to kind of dive in and understand a little bit more about the association itself and what you guys do. And I think this is a good time to perhaps bring Kito-san in. So Kishi-san, thanks for your help so far. I may come back to you in a moment, but yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you. So Kito-san, yeah, nice to speak with you and welcome to the podcast. Nice to have you here.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Yeah, no problem.
How are you doing today here?
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Great to have you with us. So yeah, we've learned a little bit more. You've been listening in there, and we've learned from Kishi-san about the bigger landscape and some of the opportunities and the trends and some of the challenges for international companies to think about. Let's drill in a little bit more and learn a bit more about your association now. So just to kick that off, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about the background. When was the association formed and why was it formed? If you could tell us a little more about that background, please.
Okay, and firstly, let me introduce myself. And I am Vice Chairman of the Fintech Association of Japan. And I'm in charge of international partnership and collaborating with fintech startups and regulators in other countries. And back to your question, Fintech Association was established in 2015. So it's 6 years ago.
Okay, that's good. So you say you've got a 6-year track record, and the reason for it being set up. I know we heard a little bit earlier about the government initiatives and momentums behind this sector and the investment being put in. Is it linked to that? Was it a government initiative that led to your association being set up, or was there a different reason that it was set up?
Yes, and actually there was government-related initiatives, but our association is a non-profit organization, so it's not a government-owned association.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. And we established the association to promote innovations in the financial industry, and also facilitates a collaboration between fintech startups and financial institutions.
Right. Okay. And that's on both the sort of domestic level within the Japanese market, but also with the international angle in and out as well, as we're discovering.
Yeah. So basically, our association and activities of our association is domestic ones.
Right.
But, yeah. On the other hand, myself and my international collaboration team is very keen to collaborate with international fintech ecosystems.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And is your objective to try and encourage and promote trade both ways? So is it bringing incoming trade into Japan in this sector, but also helping Japanese companies reach out on the international landscape?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay. I've got it. Great. Okay. Now, we know I believe it's a membership organization. And could you just tell us a little bit more about the membership? What kind of companies can become members, and how do companies become members? Could you expand on that a little bit, please?
Sure. We have two types of membership. One is startup members. The other is enterprise member. And startup member is fintech startups, which has fintech product or fintech-related services. And all the other companies are enterprise members. And companies that have a regulatory body in Japan, that can be our members. So we already have our UK startups, as Kishi-san mentioned, Revolut and Wise are our members.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So just to be really clear on that, from your perspective, there's no differentiation between domestic companies and international companies. Any of those can become members, but it's just fitting into those two categories of membership based on where they sit, whether they're sort of startup or enterprise.
It's a bit complicated, but simply speaking, small sized fintech company that has own product, that can be a fintech member.
Right. Understood. Yeah. Well, if we sort of go into the detail of that a little bit more, hopefully listening to this podcast, some of our members and our listeners from this sector will be inspired to really look at the Japanese market and go a little further. So if they do get to a stage where they're thinking to look more deeply at becoming members, what should they do? What's the next step? What's the action in order to start that discussion with you?
Feel free to come to our association and ask me and ask our association to be our member.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we are very open to collaborate with international startups. So,
great.
So, yeah, please come to us.
Okay, so I mean, we will share the contact details as part of this broadcast when we publish this broadcast. But obviously we can share your website link, so they can either contact you directly or come in through the website, I guess.
Both should be okay for us.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Great. Okay. And then finally, I think we're getting a good understanding of what you do in your association and how you can support companies. But in particular, what would you say? What are the key benefits for international companies in particular to become members of your association? What benefits can they expect for that membership?
Adding to what Kishi-san mentioned, we also support fintech startups who come to Japan in facilitating a conversation with regulators. Mm-hmm. I believe licensing and regulatory related issues is quite important for fintech startups. So we are very happy to help them to communicate with the regulators here.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. Yeah. And then there is an element of this kind of business matching or partnership matching. Do you do some of that activity as well?
Yes, we are hosting meetups and conferences in Japan. So our members can join that and feel free to talk with our other companies in the association.
Okay, great. And I guess at the moment you're having to do those kind of events. That's all virtual stuff online, I guess, at the moment, is it? Or
yeah, at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah. But once we get through this pandemic, and let's all hope we're getting towards the end of it now, we can start to see some light at the end of the tunnel. But I guess when the time is right, they will be more. There'll be opportunities for face-to-face conferences and meetings and things somewhere further down the line. Yeah.
Yeah, currently, yeah, all meetups are online, but yeah, we hope we have face-to-face meeting again soon.
Yeah, exactly. Great. And just again to give us an idea of the scope and the size of it. Do you know off the top of your head how many members you've got, or are you able to mention how many members you've got just to help us understand how big your association is?
We have now roughly 450 members.
Okay, great.
And 1/3 of our members are fintech startups.
Right.
And 2/3 of them are enterprise members.
Got it. And I would imagine for international companies and UK-based companies that are looking to come into the Japanese market, on the Japan side, I presume most of the key players in this sector are part of your membership database. I guess you've got the vast majority of the key players as members in there.
Yeah, I think so. So in Japan, there are a lot of fintech companies, and some companies are already listed at Tokyo Stock Exchange, and they are also our members.
Yeah, great. That sounds good.
Big presence in the market.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad that we've had this chance to meet both of you guys and have this interview today and hear more about what you do, because certainly from my perspective of doing business in Japan for many years now, this is one of the big challenges for foreign companies coming into the market, is how to just kind of get started over there and how to develop networks and how to meet the relevant companies in the ecosystem and how to get advice and support and get the doors open. And we know entering any foreign market, that is a really, really big challenge. And Japan is no different. And in some ways, I would say Japan is even more difficult. You know, it is for the reasons Kishi-san mentioned earlier. There are challenges around entering the market. There's no doubt it's a huge market to enter, and if you become successful, the opportunity is massive. We know it's a really, really big market, but it's a challenging one. But that's why it's just so great to hear from guys like you and understand the help and the support that you give for companies coming in. And certainly my advice would be to any of the listeners listening into this podcast within this sector, if you're looking at entering this market, I would say it's almost a no-brainer to reach out to these guys today and get their help and support, because it will save a lot of time and a lot of energy and give you some of those little shortcuts to get going in the market much quicker. So I'm really happy that we've had the chance to endorse it. Well, I think they're the main questions from me today, and I'm a little bit aware of the time, so I think we're coming to the point where we're wrapping up now. So I think it's just left for me to thank both of you, gentlemen. Kishi-san, thank you for your contribution. That was really helpful and very good. And Kito-san, thank you for your contribution and telling us more about the Fintech Association. And as I say, to everyone listening in today, I hope that's been inspirational and helped whet your appetite even more for looking at the exciting opportunities in Japan. We will share the links so that you can reach out to these two gentlemen and their association. Feel free to contact them. I think they're both active on LinkedIn as well. So look them up on LinkedIn and connect to them on LinkedIn as well, and reach out and seek their help and support. As you can see, that there is a wealth of help and support out there to help you get started in the exciting Japanese market. So that just leaves me to thank both of you guys. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you again for your time, and look forward to collaborating more with you in the future. And have a great evening, what's left of it. Thank you so much. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.